Hello, and welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today's video is part of a series I do where I compare books with their movie adaptation. And before we get into the book and movie, I want to warn you that there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie, so if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie, you should do that first, and then come back and watch this video. I also want to tell you that this is available as a podcast. I will link to Spotify and Apple down below because those are the two most popular platforms, but I am on other platforms as well. So these tend to be about 30 minutes, but especially if they're longer and it works better for you to listen to it, that is available. And I also want to say that even though my podcast is called Why the Book Wins, I do love movies as well, and there are times where the movie wins when comparing book versus movie. So it is not always the book, because I do love movies, and oftentimes, before I even started this podcast, the reason I would read a book was because I liked the movie, and so I wanted to read the book for it. And so I love both, essentially, and I think I give a fair view of both book and movie, despite my name being Why the Book Wins. Anyway, thank you for clicking on this video. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, let's get right into the book versus movie. Hi, welcome back to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today we are here to talk about Room, which is a novel written by Emma Donoghue, published in 2010, and then the movie Room was released in 2015 and directed by Lenny Abrahamson. And I want to give a shout out to Adele, who requested this video, so thank you. And if you yourself have any book versus movie requests, you can reach out to me, email, Instagram. You can comment on a YouTube video letting me know what you would like to hear me cover. I don't always cover them right away. Sometimes it takes me a few months. And then sometimes if it's when I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not for me, then I'll just tell you that that's not for me. But I also have a YouTube video that is all about this, where I give 20 different book versus movie options, and then I ask you guys to comment which ones you would like to see me do. So you can comment there saying which of the 20 you would like to hear me cover, but you could also just comment your own random suggestion, even if it isn't one that I listed. So I will link to that video so you can check it out. And yeah, I love receiving requests and recommendations. Yeah, keep them coming. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Audible, because I now have an Audible link. If you want to click it down below, you can get a free book if you are signing up for the first time. And Audible is amazing. I use it all the time. You could listen to this book on Audible as an audiobook, and they also have like thousands of others, and they have podcasts and just all sorts of things on there. It's awesome. I did not listen to this one on Audible. I read this book. However, I utilize Audible constantly because when I'm running or driving or, doing the dishes or folding laundry, I will be listening to an audiobook most of the time. And so what I'll often do is I'll have a book that I physically read, and then I have a different book I'm listening to. That way I'm kind of juggling two books, and I'm able to read more that way. Every now and then, if there's a book that's longer, then I'll do both, where I'll go back and forth between reading it when I'm at home, and then when I'm running or something, I'll have it be playing on Audible so I can finish it faster. Anyway, audiobooks are incredible. It gives you just the full experience, especially some that are just better as audiobooks, like Storyteller by Dave Grohl was one I reviewed. And then Anne of Green Gables has an amazing audiobook with Rachel McAdams. That's one I covered as well. If Beale Street Could Talk is one of my favorite audiobooks. The narrator is incredible, as well as Jane Eyre. And then you have Count of Monte Cristo, which is crazy long, and the narrator does an amazing job. Like, his voice is so different for each character, and there's a number of characters, but because he has a unique voice for each character, it helps you keep the characters in line, like who they are. So some books are just better to process as an audiobook. So anyway, check out Audible. If you are new signing up, you get a free book, and you also can rack up credits. So there's been a number of times where if there's an audiobook I want that is a bit more pricey, then I wait until I have enough credits, and then I get it for free. And yes, there is Libby where you can get free audiobooks. However, Libby has a very limited supply, as well as the fact that sometimes there's a long wait for certain audiobooks, whereas Audible, you get it right away. And they have every audiobook you could ever imagine on there. Anyway, on to Room. I'm going to give a brief summary in case you do not know the story. So we have Ma. Her name is never given. I could have sworn in the book I heard someone call her Sharon, but then when I read reviews for the book, everybody says how her name is never given. And then in the movie, they call her Joy. So I guess Sharon was someone else. Anyway, I will be referring to her as Ma because that is what she was referred to in the book, because the book is written from the perspective of her 5-year-old son, Jack. To rewind a bit, Ma, when she was 19 years old, she was kidnapped, and she is kept in this guy's garden shed. While she is there, she gives birth to Jack, and so when we are introduced to them, Jack is 5 years old, and it is at this time that she finally tells him that, Room is not the world, and she tells him about the world outside of Room, and they plan an escape, basically. And so they pretend that Jack is dead, and she wraps him up in a rug, And then the kidnapper, he is like picking up the rug with Jack inside it to go bury him. He puts it in the back of his truck, and when his truck stops, Jack gets out of the rug, runs out, goes to a person, tells them, to save his ma. Police come and they, rescue Ma. And that's the first half of the book and movie. The second half is Ma and Jack adjusting to life after escaping. And so that's the gist of it. And to get into the book review. So yeah, this book is told from the perspective of Jack, which I have no problems with books written from the perspective of a child. Like I've read some before and I didn't think anything of it. Like I enjoyed it. But this one is full of just I get some parts it's showing how Jack has such an imagination, but it was just kind of like, why? And then there's also baby talk in there too. But anyway, I'm going to share some examples so you can understand what I'm talking about. So the first one is, I get on Ma's lap and rock her with our legs all jumbled up. She's the wizard transformed into a giant squid, and I'm Prince Jack, or Jack and I escape in the end. We do tickles and bouncy bounce and jaggedy shadows on the bed wall. And the words like bouncy bounce and jaggedy and weird words like that, I should have got more examples, but it's like baby talk words is a lot in this book, especially the first half, but the second half too. And then another one is, if I ran away, I'd become a chair and Ma wouldn't know which one. Or I'd make myself invisible and stick to skylight and she'd look right through me. Or a tiny speck of dust and go up her nose and she'd sneeze me right out. Which that one, yeah, I get there. Like he'll just be telling us about their day, but it's just written in this little kid baby talk way. And then that part right there where it's just like, what? Like, what was that even for? I don't know. Showing his imagination. I get you need an imagination when you're raised in a room, but it could just be a bit much. And this was actually my second time with this book because I saw the movie when it came out and I loved it. And afterwards I tried reading the book, but the way it's written with this kind of talk, I stopped at a quarter of the way through because I couldn't do it. Whereas I stuck it out this time around. But anyway, I wanted to share a section from a review on Goodreads because I thought this user worded it really well. The user's name is The Girl by the Sea of Cortez, and she's referencing like the baby talk that's used in the way this book is written. Well, a paragraph of that here and there might have worked, but a whole book, not on your life. And this is a kid who can sing along to Eminem and Woody Guthrie music videos. He knows the latest dances, he listens to people speak on TV. His own mother, the only person with whom he converses, speaks normally. He uses words like repelling and hippopotami with ease. Heck, he even knows more about the fall of the Berlin Wall than many Germans. So what's with the most unintelligible baby talk? I know he's only 5, but other than his horrendous speech, he seems like a precocious 5. And please, how many rundowns of Dora the Explorer or SpongeBob SquarePants can one reader take? So yeah, the time in room. I mean, like I said, we get the baby talk in the second half as well, but it is more so in the first half. And so for me, it caused the time in a room I was just wanting to hurry and wrap it up kind of because I knew they were going to escape because I'd already seen the movie. So it made me just want to hurry and get to the next part and be done with the way this is written, with the way they talk about room. But even in the second half of the book, what's annoying there is that Jack will make, these profound, insightful comments on the world is the way he sees it as this like sweet, innocent child who sees the world clearer than adults do, right? And it made me think of like when parents share on Twitter things their kid says. And some of the times it doesn't even seem real. Like it seems like they're trying to talk as if they're a child, saying their child says it. And that's how some of these lines come across because it doesn't sound like a 5-year-old talking. It sounds like someone trying to talk like a 5-year-old. Or anyway, I'm going to share a section of it. So one section reads, "In the world I notice persons are nearly always stressed and have no time. Even grandma often says that, but she and Steppa don't have jobs, so I don't know how persons with jobs do the jobs and all the living as well. In room, me and Ma had time for everything. I guess the time gets spread very thin like butter over all over the world. The roads and the houses and the playgrounds and stores, so there's only a little smear of time on each place. Then everyone has to hurry on to the next bit. Also, everywhere I'm looking at kids, adults mostly don't seem to like them, not even the parents do. They call the kids gorgeous and so cute. They make the kids do the thing all over again so they can take a photo, but then they don't want to actually play with them. They'd rather drink coffee, talking to other adults. Sometimes there's a small kid crying and the ma doesn't even seem to hear." I just found that unnecessary and, his commentary on the world and how people don't act the way they should. And it happens a number of times. And again, if it was here or there or once, it would be okay. But similar to the baby talk, it's just so constant that it got old. Also, that part is written so eloquently. And then we have that beside like weird baby talk sections. I don't have a 5-year-old, so I don't know, maybe people are like, oh, that's totally how 5-year-olds are. I mean, I have nieces and nephews though that are around 5 years old and they're not like that. So Anyway, despite my complaints, I did really like this book though. I gave it 4 stars. Even with my complaints on the writing style, I think it was a great idea for a book, and I love that she includes the second half when they're adjusting to the world and it's not like once they escape, it's happily ever after. And I also love that it's written from the perspective of Jack. Despite my complaints again about the writing style, I enjoyed seeing it from his perspective, and that was a very unique way to do it. So I think it was a great idea for a book, and I do think it was well executed despite some of the baby talk. And on to the movie. This movie was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, as well as Best Actress for Brie Larson, who plays Ma. Brie Larson, that's the only Academy Award the movie won, she won for Best Actress, and it was well deserved. And this was also the movie that shot Jacob Trembley into stardom. Like everybody who pays attention to movies knows who Jacob Trembley is at this point, and it is thanks to this movie that he became so well known, and he is incredible in this. And yeah, seeing this in theaters was just such an emotional experience, and it's just beautifully shot, wonderfully done in every way, and the performances are just so emotional and raw. Donoghue herself actually wrote the screenplay, and I read that she wrote it as a screenplay before writing the novel, and then she published the novel, and then I got optioned for a movie, and then she wrote the screenplay, or rewrote it. Basically, she wrote the screenplay, and the movie follows the book so closely. There are some changes we will talk about, but for the most part, it is a very faithful adaptation. So the first change we're going to talk about is that Ma had a baby before Jack. So like a year before Jack, she gave birth to a baby girl. However, when she was giving birth, the baby got like tangled on the cord, and so it died in birth. And old Nick was there at the time, and she was saying like, do something, like you can do something, you're standing right there. But he didn't do anything. And so he ends up taking the baby and burying it. And then later, like a year later, she gives birth to Jack. And because of the experience with the first baby, she does not want, the guy's name is Old Nick, is what they call him. She doesn't want him there. So when he tries to come in, she's like, she yells at him to get out of here, I'm giving birth, and he leaves. And I thought it was sweet because in the book, she will tell Jack that the first baby was Jack trying to be born, but it didn't work out. And so then he tried again the second time and just came back as a boy instead. And I just thought that was a really sweet way to look at it is, it was Jack attempting to be with her, and the first time didn't work, but the second time it did. And also once they are saved, she tells the police about this first baby, and like the baby's death is going to be used as, like the old Nick is going to be tried with the death of that baby as well. And this whole part was not in the movie at all. And to talk about old Nick, so that is not his real name. They don't know what his real name is, but they call him Old Nick because they say saw something on TV about a man that only comes in the house at night. And Nick only comes into the shed at night. And so they call him Old Nick. And there are in certain countries, like I think England, Old Nick is a phrase, a name that is used with the devil. And the author even said that she purposefully used the name Old Nick because it is referred to as the devil as well. And she also said that she purposefully had Jack be a boy because she wanted to have the goodness of Jack outweigh the badness of Old Nick, is these two men, and Jack outweighs the badness of Old Nick, essentially. I also read the author also said that it was supposed to be symbolic of, Old Nick is Satan, and then Jack is Christ, and Ma is Mary. And religion was more in the book, Ma will have them pray and she tells them scripture stories, whereas that wasn't in the movie at all. But yeah, in the author, in an interview I read, she said how she wanted to include that because when you're in that situation, you're holding on to whatever you have. And even if your faith wasn't very strong beforehand, it becomes stronger because it's all you have, and you're trying to hold on to any hope. And so as far as their time in room in the movie, this is split perfectly in half. The time spent in room and the time spent in the world is perfect halves. And I think the book is like that too. But in the book, their time in room, I wasn't bored, but I was kind of wanting things to happen because like I said, I went into this book already having seen the movie. And so I knew they were going to escape. And so after so long in room, hearing their days described, which aren't that interesting, I was just okay, come on, let's get this going. Whereas in the movie, I never felt that way. I was always intrigued and always interested and invested, and I was never bored, even in their time in a room. And the movie speeds it up, as movies always do. And so there are things that maybe they left out or that they condensed in the movie. For example, in the movie, the power is cut, and it's only cut for 1 day in the movie, whereas in the book, it was cut for 2 days or more. There's also the scene in book and movie where Jack gets out of the wardrobe and sees Old Nick, and Old Nick gets upset, and Ma's yelling, and he grabs her. And this was in the book, but there was also a separate event in the book too, where he had his Jeep out on a shelf, and he messed with his remote, and so the Jeep fell on Old Nick, who was in bed, and then he freaks out because he thought Ma was trying to do something to him. So we had both of those events happen in the book, whereas in the movie, they just have the event where Jack gets out of the wardrobe to look at old Nick. And then, yeah, their plan of escape is the same, where they first pretend that Jack is sick and try to get him to take him to the hospital, but old Nick won't take him to the hospital. So then the next day, they pretend that Jack has died and they wrap him in the rug. And I like this in the book. There's a part, like they'll like yell at the skylight and she'll like do light signals at nighttime. But there's a part in the book where she just accepts like, we're not going to be rescued. Like, we need to do this ourselves, clearly. And so just taking it upon herself to be like, I'm putting a stop to this. And then after they get out of room, so in the movie, they get out of room and then right away, we just wake up and it's the next day and they're in the hospital. And then very soon after, they go to live with Grandma and Leo, who they call Steppa in the book. Whereas in the movie, once they get rescued, like it takes a while for them to actually go to bed because they need to like give them their statement, give the police their statement. They need to get all these tests done. And so like they have to go through all of this before getting to bed. And then they end up staying in like this mental institution for a lot of the book. And it's not until her overdose where she stays there, but then Jack is taken to stay with Grandma. So they don't like move in with Grandma right away like the movie shows. And also by the end of the movie, they're still living with Grandma and Leo. However, in the book, by the end of the book, they have gotten an apartment in this housing complex for people who had lived in the mental institution and are now transitioning to life outside of the institution. Also in the book, Ma has a brother named Paul, and Paul is married and has a daughter of his own who is 3. And so we see them interact at the hospital, and then they plan to go with Ma and Jack to go to the dinosaur museum. However, on the day they're supposed to go, it's the day after the interview, and Ma is having a gone day. And so she just isn't getting out of bed, so Jack just goes on his own with them. However, before they go to the museum, they stop at a store. And then, like, the parts where they take Jack to a store, because Paul and his wife take Jack to a store, and then at another time, Grandma takes him to a store. Like, it was so stressful to read, not because Jack is overwhelmed with the experience, but it's stressful on the part of the parents with them having to deal with Jack because he doesn't know how things work. For example, when the brother and wife, the wife's brother, when they take him to a store, he like accidentally shoplifts because he doesn't understand how shopping works. And then he also like randomly takes off his shoes and just leaves them and walks away because he thinks he doesn't need to wear shoes indoors. He never wore shoes in room, so wearing shoes just at all is an adjustment for him. And then there's a part where they take him to go use the bathroom and he just doesn't understand what's appropriate and what isn't, and boundaries. And then the part when Grandma takes him to the store, she's buying him a soccer ball and she goes to go pay for it or something, and then he gets distracted and wanders off, and these women see him. And he's telling them like, oh, like, I'm Jack from the news, that's me. And so they're wanting to get pictures and stuff, and the grandma has to come up and take him away. And yeah, it's just because he doesn't know the etiquette of the world and just what's appropriate and what's not. And you need to pay for things and you can't just take your shoes off and all this stuff. It was just stressful putting myself in the position of the adults who are having to deal with this. And you can't get that up. Like, you need to tell him what's appropriate and what's not. But then, you can't get too upset with him because how does he even know, right? And so, yeah, anyway, all of that was left out of the movie, though. And then in the movie and book, we have Ma's dad. And in the book, he is in very little. Like, he shows up once at the hospital. And they are in the cafeteria with Ma and Jack. And then, like, basically he says something about how he can't stand seeing Jack and being around Jack because it's just a reminder of what she has been through. And so Ma is like, so you just liked it better when you thought I was dead? And then, they have this interaction, and then the dad leaves and he flies back home. And we never see him again in the book. And in the movie, it's very similar, but the dad is there for more of it. However, we do have a similar scene where they're at the dinner table at Grandma and Leo's house. And then Brie Larson is like, you haven't said one word to Jack and you don't even look at him. And then William H. Macy plays the dad, and he says how, like, he can't. And she's asking him, like, look at Jack. And he just refuses to even look at him. And after this scene, again, we just don't see the dad anymore. And then with Grandma and Leo, which again, he's called Steppa in the book, like step because he's a stepdad or step grandpa. Anyway, I'll just call him Leo. The scenes with them in the book interacting with Jack were just so sweet as they like are connecting with him and bonding with him. Then the scenes in the movie between the three of them were just like even more heartwarming and sweet and just so endearing. And I loved it so much. All the scenes with the three of them, or, even if Ma's there too, just anything with Grandma and Leo, I loved. I did love in the book, we see how grandma like isn't babying Jack, and she's like encouraging him to get out of his comfort zone and to try new things. And she's not going to let him just, she's being kind with him and letting him go slow if he needs to. But at the same time, she is wanting to push him and encouraging him in a kind way to, try these new things. And yeah, in the movie, maybe that's not quite as much. Like in the book, we see her, taking him to the store and encouraging him to go to playgrounds and trying to get him to talk to other kids. Like she doesn't force it on him though. Like she's patient with him. But yeah, anyway, just great scenes. I really loved it. It was very sweet. And in the movie, again, so sweet. The acting was amazing and it was just so heartwarming. And we have the scene where Jack even tells the grandma that he loves her, and that was so sweet. That was not in the book. And also in the movie, they kept Ma's room exactly how it was when she went missing. Whereas in the book, they had turned her room into like a home gym. And she tells them how like years into the disappearance, a grief counselor told her that she should take all of Ma's stuff and donate it. And so she did, because they were like, you need to move on. It's been so long now. And like, I get, when someone has been missing for years, the people do need to go on with their lives. But putting myself in the shoes of Ma, where you come home from having been kidnapped and you see that your parents were trying to move on, like that would be so hard, right? Because you were there the whole time, you were alive, and they were having to live as if you had died. And I mean, I get it, but just the shoes of the person who had been kidnapped, that would just be so hard, I would think. And also another thing with her parents, this is a more minor thing, but in the book we learned that she was adopted by her parents, whereas in the movie that's never mentioned. And then to talk about Ma, it seems like in the book she was adjusting better than she was in the movie. In both, we have the scene where she goes on the interview and the interviewer is asking her just really insensitive questions. For example, she's like, the ultimate selfless act as a mother would have been to have Jack be taken to a hospital so he could have a normal childhood, like guilting her for not having done that. And then she also refers to old Nick as Jack's father. Ma obviously does not think of old Nick in that way, and she doesn't want to, because why would she? And so the interviewer talking to her like this is just very hurtful. And in the book, at one point, she turns to her lawyer and she's like, is she allowed to ask me such stupid questions? And that wasn't in the movie. And also in the book, we overhear, because it's written from Jack's perspective, but we overhear her having a lot of conversations with her doctor about, adjusting and trying to get back to normal and the hardships she's having. So she's opening up about it more in the book, it seems. Whereas in the movie, it seemed like she was having a harder time maybe opening up about her struggles. And there are like just some amazing scenes again. But there is one scene where she is in her room, like she's trying to go to sleep, and Jack is in there watching Dora on grandma's cell phone. And so she tells him, watch that somewhere else, but then he won't leave. And so then she picks him up, she grabs him, and she takes him to the living room where all these toys are. And she's like, play with some toys. You should be so grateful to have these. Like, play, have fun. The grandma comes in being like, why are you so upset? Why are you getting upset with Jack? And Ma says how, I'm worried about Jack. Like, he's not adjusting well, and he needs to connect to something. Where Jack is adjusting pretty well. And Ma is projecting her own problems onto Jack. And so grandma says that, where she's like, Jack's doing fine. Then Ma breaks down and she's just like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I'm supposed to be happy and I'm not. Like, what is wrong? She also yells at the grandma, like she and the grandma have this argument. And yeah, it was a great scene, but that was not in the book. A line that was in the book, again, during the interview that I really liked and I wanted to mention, is how the interviewer tells her that people are writing in calling Ma an angel and a talisman of goodness, to which Ma, it says in the book, after this it reads, Ma makes a face. All I did was I survived, and I did a pretty good job raising Jack. A good enough job. And so I love this concept of how we have these people that we look at as heroes who went through something hard and they were heroic and survived, and so we see them as these heroes. But how in reality, the person who went through that, they don't feel like a hero, because they're like, I wasn't doing that to be heroic. I was doing it out of desperation and to survive. I was doing it because I had to. And if they could go back in time, they don't want to be seen as a hero. They would have rather have just not have gone through that experience at all, right? And this is brought up in different books I've read. And so, I don't know, I think it's really interesting because we love hearing about these heroes and what they went through. And sometimes we romanticize it and glamorize it. But the truth is, they don't feel like a hero. They were just doing what they had to. And if they could take it back, they wouldn't have wanted to go through those experiences. I mean, I'm generalizing, but you get what I'm saying. And then in book and movie, we see how Jack misses room once they're out, However, this was even more so in the book, and he even writes a list for Grandma to give to the police where he lists things from Room he would like, including the rug and his Jeep. And so he has those and he brings them with him. So yeah, it just seemed like he missed Room more in the book than he did in the movie. In both book and movie, though, in the end, they go back to Room, or to the garden shed, to see it. And Jack is able to get that closure that he needs, where he finally is like he realizes how small it was. And he's like, it doesn't even feel like Room anymore. And he's able to finally say goodbye. And Ma says goodbye as well. And so Jack and Ma are able to get the closure they need to just let go of that part of their lives. And move on. And then real quick, just some other changes I wanted to hurry and run through. So for starters, in the movie, at the end of the movie, we see Jack has a friend, another boy, and he's playing soccer, and it's really sweet that he's making friends. However, that was not in the book. And also in the movie, we see that Ma is still breastfeeding Jack, and it's not until after her overdose, her suicide attempt, that did I mention that? But in the book, she has her interview, and then the next day she has a gone day, and then when Jack returns from being with Paul and the wife, he sees that Ma has thrown up and she's sick, and it's because she had tried to overdose, and so the doctors come in and they take Jack to Grandma's house. And in the movie, this was also after the interview, but I don't know if it was right after. Anyway, Jack goes in the bathroom and it's blocked because Ma has fallen because she overdosed, and so he calls the grandparents, and such a heartbreaking scene. Anyway, so I forgot to mention that. But anyway, because she's apart from him for a week or two after her overdose, she stops producing milk, and so she no longer breastfeeds him. And that's just kind of lightly covered in the movie. Whereas in the book, this was a bigger deal, because when they escape, the fact that she is still breastfeeding her 5-year-old, people think it's weird. And even when she's interviewed, the interviewer brings it up. And her response is out of this whole story of what Jack and I have been through, that's what you're focused on. But again, like the movie, after she's gone for a week or two, again, she stops producing milk, and then they just stop. But that is kind of, representative, along with Bad Tooth, which we'll talk about, is Jack letting go of his dependency on Ma. Obviously, they're still close, but, him growing up, basically. Which, speaking of Bad Tooth, in the book, when he escapes, he keeps Bad Tooth, which Ma had a bad tooth, and it falls out. And when he escapes in the rug, he has it in his sock as a way to feel connected to Ma. And then later on, when they're separated because she's in the hospital, he will sometimes suck on it as a way to self-soothe, which kind of grossed me out, if I'm being honest. But by the end of the book, he's lost it and doesn't know where it is, which again could be symbolic. And in the movie, when he escapes, he has Bad Tooth and he keeps it in his mouth. And then I think that's all we really see. I don't think he has it again. So in both, he does keep it in his mouth at times, but in the movie, this was definitely more of a comfort, self-soothing thing he would do. And also in the movie, Leo has a dog, which of course Jack is very excited about. That was not in the book. And then after they escape, in the real world, as they're adjusting, Jack will often bump into things because he has no depth perception. And then his eyesight for distance is also very weak, and he has a hard time seeing far because in Room, he never had to see far. And then also in the movie, the director had originally wanted a scene where we see old Nick raping Ma, essentially. But Emma Donoghue was like, no, I don't want that. And she even said that was one reason why she wrote it from a child's perspective, is the reality of this is so horrific and terrible, but writing it from a child's perspective, you get a bit of distance, and it's still horrific and terrible, but it filters it in a way. And so she didn't want it to be this graphic, horrific thing. And she didn't want the movie to be that either. And I think that was a good call, so I'm glad that wasn't included. And on to book or movie. So the movie has some voiceover done by Jacob Trembley. It's Jack, where he's talking in that little kid way. However, it's just here and there. It's just a few times. And so it works. And it's not annoying the way it was in the book. And also, I feel like we understand Ma better in the movie, because in the book, everything Ma does, we're seeing through the perception of a 5-year-old, her son Jack. Whereas in the movie, we're seeing it happen. And so I just felt more connected to her, and you could just see more of what she was going through. And the movie also has that scene where the night before she tells Jack he needs to pretend he's dead. She's crying, and you can just feel how she does not want to have to ask her son to do what he has to do, and just how hard it was for her to ask him to do that. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is the movie was just so much more emotionally impactful for me. Yes, I did see the movie first, so maybe that's playing a part, but it's just so beautifully shot. The acting is incredible, and man, try watching this movie and not cry, right? Especially in theaters. But even if you're watching it at home, it is just so amazing. I don't know what else to say. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. And honestly, if you've seen the movie, I wouldn't bother recommending the book because the movie, like, they change things or switch things around or shorten things or leave some things out. But for the most part, it follows the book so close. And as I was watching it, like, I didn't even care about changes that were made because I was just so engrossed in the story as it was being told in the movie. And the changes didn't bother me at all because the movie's incredible. Absolutely amazing. The book I would give like 4 stars, but the movie is like a glowing 5 stars and beyond. It is amazing. So the movie definitely wins here. And I will wrap this up with that. So thank you for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. And let me know your thoughts if you have read Room. Did you find the narration annoying or did you like it? Anyway, join me next week where I will be talking about Secret Window, Secret Garden. It is a book by Steve Martin and the movie stars Johnny Depp. So that will be next week and I will have guests for that episode. So super exciting. So join me for that and I will see you then. Bye.